January 5th, 1942. Tokyo. Paper lanterns swing in the cold winter air. The streets erupt. Crowds surge through the Ginza, voices rising in waves of celebration. Sake flows freely. Strangers embrace. The shrines overflow with offerings of gratitude. In just 4 weeks, the impossible has become real. Hong Kong has fallen. Manila is Japanese. Singapore the Gibraltar of the East teeters on the edge of collapse. The empire of the rising sun has torn through European colonial power like a typhoon through paper screens. And somewhere in the churning waters south of Tokyo Bay, aboard the battleship Nagato, stands the man who orchestrated it all. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Imperial Combined Fleet, architect of Pearl Harbor, the most celebrated military leader in Japan. He does not celebrate. While Tokyo drowns in euphoria, Yamamoto sits alone in his quarters, staring at maps. His staff whispers about his mood. Dark. Withdrawn. The victory everyone else sees as destiny. He sees as a clock. Ticking. He had told them this would happen. The first 6 months would be intoxication. Success after success. The world would call Japan unstoppable. But he also told them what comes after. No one wanted to hear that part. This is not a story about victory. This is a story about a man who spent years trying to prevent a war and then became its greatest weapon. A man who studied his enemies so well that he understood them better than they understood themselves. A man who knew, with terrible clarity, exactly how his story would end. This is the story of 6 months when Japan ruled the Pacific, and the moment when everything Yamamoto feared began to come true. The boy named 56 Nagaoka, Japan, 1884. Isoroku Takano arrives into the world as the 7th son of an aging schoolteacher. His name means 56. His father's age at his birth. It's an unusual choice. Almost prophetic in its precision. A name that calculates, measures, counts. The boy grows up cold and hungry in a fishing village where winters bite and food is scarce. His father, Sadakichi, is a former Samori-turned-educator, a man who survived the chaos of the Meiji Restoration by teaching others how to navigate a changing world. Young Isoroku is small, often sick, but ferociously disciplined. He watches his father teach with military precision. He learns that survival requires adaptation. That the old samurai code must serve the new Japan or become meaningless ritual. At 15, facing a choice between teaching and military service, he takes the entrance exam for the Imperial Naval Academy at Adajima. 300 candidates compete. He places second. The academy is brutal. No smoking. No drinking. No suis. No contact with women. Physical training that leaves boys collapsed on parade grounds. Academic rigor that breaks the unprepared. Isoroku thrives. By 1904, he graduates 7th in his class. Just as tensions with Russia reach a breaking point, May 27, 1905. The Battle of Tsushima Strait. Ensign Takano stands aboard the cruiser Nishin, part of Admiral Togo's fleet. The most decisive naval battle since Trafalgar is about to unfold. The Russian Baltic Fleet has sailed halfway around the world for this confrontation. 42 ships, 38,000 tons of modern steel. They are about to be annihilated. When the shells begin to scream overhead, and Takano discovers something about himself, he is not afraid. The chaos crystallizes. His mind sharpens. Then, at 6:15 p.m., a shell strikes the knee. Everything goes dark. When Awaka's 2 fingers are gone from his left hand, an orange-sized chunk of flesh is missing from his thigh. Blood soaks his uniform. Around him, the sea churns with debris and bodies, but the Russian fleet is destroyed. Admiral Togo's victory is total. Unprecedented. A non-Western power has defeated a European empire in modern warfare. The lesson sears itself into young Takano's consciousness. Surprise, concentration of force, Audacity. Victory goes to whoever strikes first. 2 months in the hospital. More months convalescing at home. During his recovery, he does something that raises eyebrows among his neighbors. He reads Western books, the Bible, English literature, philosophy. When criticized, his response is simple. Western books have much to teach Japan. The American education, both of Isoroku's parents, die. Following tradition, he is adopted by the Yamamoto family, wealthy descendants of samurai generals. He takes their name, Isoroku Yamamoto. His career accelerates. Naval Staff College. Promotions. By 1919, as a newly minted lieutenant commander, he receives orders that will shape everything that follows. Harvard University, Cambridge, Massachusetts. He arrives in America as Japan is riding high. The Great War has elevated Japan to great power status. Victory over Russia still echoes. The nation is expanding, modernizing, electrifying with possibility. Yamamoto settles into rented rooms in Brookline. He's supposed to study English and economics. What he actually does is study America itself. He hitchhikes across the country during summers, visits oil fields in Texas and Mexico, tours factories in Detroit, watches the industrial heart of America pump. The scale stuns him. The wealth, the resources, the sheer productive capacity. At night, his fellow students introduce him to poker. It becomes an obsession. He plays all night, winning hand after hand. Not for the money, he uses his winnings to fund more travel. He's fascinated by the game's mathematics, the psychology, the way Americans think. Years later, as naval attach in Washington, he'll continue playing poker with U.S. military officers. He'll develop contempt for their mental agility at the card table. But he never develops contempt for American industrial might. That's the critical distinction his colleagues in Tokyo will fail to understand. Between 1919 and 1928, Yamamoto spends years immersed in American life. Harvard, Naval, attaché in Washington. He speaks fluent English, makes American friends, visits shipyards, studies naval construction, takes notes on everything. His conclusion is mathematical, precise, unshakable. Japan cannot defeat America in a prolonged war. Not even close. The industrial capacity isn't comparable. Oil reserves aren't comparable. America's ability to build ships, planes, tanks do replace losses and overwhelm through sheer production mix. Victory impossible. It's not opinion. It's arithmetic. The rise and the warning through the 1920s and 1930s, Yamamoto becomes Japan's foremost authority on naval aviation. He commands the carrier Akagi, heads the aeronautics department, revolutionizes training system. All pilots learn night flying, a radical departure that his students initially resist. It tastes him, I regard death, in training the same as a hero is. Death in action. There is very little time to reach the West's level. His foresight is remarkable. While battleship admirals scoff, Yamamoto argues that carriers will dominate future naval warfare. He pushes for the construction of faster, bigger carriers. He champions the development of the Zero fighter. He's building the weapon that will strike Pearl Harbor, but he doesn't want to use it. Vice Minister of the Navy, one of Japan's elite policymakers. The military factions are growing aggressive. Manchuria has been occupied. Full-scale war with China looms. Army officers whisper about alliances with Nazi Germany, about expansion, about Japan's destiny to rule the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. Yamamoto opposes all of it. He argues passionately against the tripartite pact with Germany and Italy. He warns that such an alliance will lead to war with America and Britain, possibly even the Soviet Union. He points out that Japan's entire economy depends on imports from the United States. When Japanese planes bombed the American gunboat Panay on the Yangtze River in December 1937, killing 3 Americans, Yamamoto personally apologizes to U.S. Ambassador Joseph Grew. His stance makes him a target. Young Army and Navy officers begin speaking against him publicly. Nationalist organizations send death threats. His mail fills with promises of assassination. The military police ostensibly assigned to protect Timar, actually there to watch him. His response to the death threats is pure samurai stoicism. To die for emperor and nation is the highest hope of a military man. One man's life or death is a matter of no importance. All that matters is the empire. But his superiors fear the threats are real. In August 1939, to keep him safe and away from Tokyo's political knives, he's promoted to admiral and made commander-in-chief of the combined fleet. He's pushed out to sea and placed in command of Japan's entire naval force. The prophecy, the warnings come repeatedly. Different audiences, same message. To Prince Fumimaro Konoje, the Prime Minister. I can raise havoc with them for 1 year, or at most 18 months. After that, I can give no one any guarantees. To a group of senior admirals. If it is necessary to fight, in the first 6 months, to a year of war against the United States and England, I will run wild. I will show you an uninterrupted succession of victories. But I must also tell you that if the war be prolonged for 2 or 3 years, I have no confidence in our ultimate victory. To a classroom of children during a school visit in 1940. Japan cannot beat America. Therefore, Japan should not fight America. The specificity is chilling. 6 months. Maybe a year. 10. Defeat. No one listens. The military factions have what later historians will call victory disease, a certainty of invincibility, fueled by easy conquests in China and the weakness of colonial powers. They see European empires crumbling under German assault. They see resources in Southeast Asia for the taking. They see destiny. Yamamoto sees a clock. In January 1941, he writes to a friend named Ryoichi, an ultra-nationalist who has publicly advocated for war with America. The letter will later be intercepted, mistranslated, and weaponized as propaganda, but the original text reveals something else entirely. He warns that starting a war is easy. Finishing one is not. That it is essential to see the path to the end before beginning. That America's industrial strength makes prolonged conflict suicidal. This is not boasting. This is pleading, but the wheels are already turning. Oil embargoes, diplomatic deadlock. The military government in Tokyo sees no alternative. Prince Kanoi resigns. General Hideki Tojo becomes prime minister. War is coming. And Yamamoto, the man who spent a decade arguing against it, must now plan how to fight it. The perfect crime. If Japan must fight America, Yamamoto concludes, there is only one possible strategy. Strike first. Strike hard. Cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet before it can mobilize. Buy time for Japan to seize the oil, rubber, and resources of Southeast Asia. Create a defensive perimeter so strong that America will negotiate peace rather than suffer the casualties required to break through. It's not a strategy for winning the war. It's a strategy for not losing it immediately. The plan for Pearl Harbor crystallizes 6 carriers, over 400 aircraft, a strike force that will sail 4,000 miles across the Pacific in absolute radio silence. The attack will hit on a Sunday morning, when American defenses are minimal. The Naval General Staff opposes it unanimously. Too risky. Too bold. What if the American carriers aren't in port? What if the attack fails? Yamamoto plays his final card. Resignation. He tells them plainly if they won't support the Pearl Harbor plan, he'll resign his command. They can find another admiral to fight their war. The staff capitulates. On November 26, 1941, Vice Admiral Kichi Nagomo leads the Kitabutada striking force out of Hitokapu Bay. 6 carriers. Akagi kaga soryu hiryu. Shokaku, Zuikaku. 2 battleships. 3 cruisers. 9 destroyers. 9 destroyers. 8 tankers. The force proceeds in total communications blackout. Weather is rough. Siasari gray. No commercial shipping lanes are crossed. No aircraft spot them. American intelligence remains oblivious. December 7th, 1941. 7:55 a.m. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The first bombs fall. Chaos erupts. Battleship Row burns. The Arizona explodes. The Oklahoma 21 ships damaged or destroyed. 188 aircraft demolished. 2,403 Americans dead. The tactical success is total. Stunning. Beyond what even Yamamoto hoped. The 3 American carriers are at sea. Undamaged. Still operational. And the oil tank forms the infrastructure that makes Pearl Harbor function as a forward base remain untouched. The repair facilities survive. Yamamoto immediately recognizes both achievements. In Tokyo, the celebrations begin. Admiral Togo's victory at Tsushima has been matched, exceeded. Japan has struck the greatest naval power on Earth and lived. Yamamoto is a national hero overnight. He does not celebrate. The 6 months, what follows, is the most remarkable military offensive in modern history. December 8th. Japanese forces invade Malaya and Thailand. Simultaneously. Coordinated. December 10th. British battleship, Prince of Wales and battlecruiser Repulsa sunk by Japanese aircraft of Malaya. The Royal Navy's Eastern Fleet is crippled. The age of the battleship dies in a morning. December 25th. Hong Kong surrenders after 18 days of fighting. British, Canadian, and Indian forces march into captivity. January 2nd, 1942. Manila falls. American and Filipino forces retreat to Bataan. January 11th. The Japanese capture Kuala Lumpur, capital of Malaya. The speed is breathtaking. In 4 weeks, Japan dismantles colonial empires that took centuries to build. Singapore, the Gibraltar of the East, is under siege. The Dutch East Indies are being overrun. Wake Island, Guam, the Philippines all falling like dominoes. By January 5th, as Tokyo celebrates, Japan controls 20 million square miles of territory, an empire 5 times the size of what it held before Pearl Harbor. Yamamoto's predictions are unfolding with terrifying precision. The combined fleet is running wild. The first air fleet sweeps through the Pacific, striking from Wake Island to Ceylon. On February 15th, Singapore surrenders. 1,000 British, Indian, and Australian troops become prisoners of war. Churchill will call it the worst disaster in British military history. In the first months of 1942, Japan captures Manila, Rangoon, Singapore, Jakarta, most of the Dutch East Indies, and half of New Guinea. Allied resistance is scattered, disorganized, overwhelmed. The victory disease intensifies. Officers begin planning the next operations invasions of Australia, Ceylon, Midway, the illusions under the assumption of invincibility. Only Yamamoto remains somber. His staff notices. Some attribute it to fatigue. Others whispered that he's superstitious, unwilling to tempt fate by celebrating too early. The truth is simpler. He's counting 1 month. 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. The clock he warned about is ticking. April 18, 1942. Tokyo. Shortly after noon, air raid sirens wail across the capital. Impossible. Japan is beyond American reach. The sirens must be a drill. Then the bombs fall. Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle's B-25 bombers launched impossibly from the carrier Hornet. Tokyo, Kobe, Nagoya, and Osaka. The material damage is minimal. 16 bombs. A few factories. Some residential areas. The psychological damage is catastrophic. The home islands are supposed to be sacred, invulnerable, protected by the combined fleet. And yet American bombers have appeared over Tokyo in broad daylight. The naval staff is humiliated. The government is furious. Yamamoto writes in his diary, One has the embarrassing feeling that we have been caught napping. The raid forces his hand. The Naval General Staff demands action. An operation to extend the defensive perimeter, to prevent future attacks, to destroy what remains of the American carrier fleet. Yamamoto proposes Midway. The plan is complex. Diversionary attacks on the Aleutian Islands, a massive invasion force for Midway Atoll. The main striking force for Carrier Will Krusty. American carriers when they come to defend Midway. Decisive battle. Final victory. The staff agrees. War games are conducted aboard the battleship Yamato. In the simulations, Japanese losses are heavy. The referees adjust the results, resurrecting sunken carriers to continue the exercise. No one questions the assumptions. Everyone believes in destiny. June 4, 1942. The waters northwest of Midway Island. The American carriers are supposed to be days away. Intelligence estimates put them near Pearl Harbor. They are not. The U.S. has broken the Japanese naval code. Admiral Chester Nimitz knows exactly where the Japanese fleet will be. He's positioned 3 carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown in ambush. Vice Admiral Nagumo's 4 carriers launched their first strike against Midway. The attack is moderately successful, but American torpedo bombers from Midway counterattack, forcing Nagamo to keep his fighters overhead for defense. Then American torpedo bombers from the carriers arrive. Squadron after squadron. They're massacred. Old, slow planes. Inadequate tactics. 41 aircraft. Only 6 survive, but they accomplish one thing. They draw the Japanese fighter cover down to sea level. At 10:22 a.m., dive bombers from Enterprise in Yorktown arrive at 14,000 feet. They find the Japanese carriers. Defenseless, fuel lines are exposed. Bombs and torpedoes litter the decks. Aircraft are being rearmed. In 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers are burning. Akagi, Kagasoryu. The 4th carrier, Haru, launches a desperate counterattack and damages Yorktown. But by evening, American Daivamas find Haru and set her aflame as well. All 4 carriers are lost, along with 248 aircraft, and critically many of Japan's most experienced pilots. Men whose training took years, men who cannot be replaced. Yamamoto, commanding from the battleship Yamato, hundreds of miles away, receives the reports in stunned silence. He attempts to maneuver his remaining surface forces, including the massive Yamato, to trap the American carriers in a night battle. But Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the American fleet, prudently withdraws east. By June 7th, it's over. The 6 months have ended. Yamamoto cancels the Midway operation, orders a withdrawal. The staff aboard Yamato moves in shocked silence. The Admiral sits alone, reading battle reports, groaning audibly. He had told them 6 months, maybe a year, then the tide would turn. It has turned. The long retreat June 1942 becomes August 1942. American Marines land on Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands. It's supposed to be a minor skirmish. It becomes a 6-month meat grinder. Japanese reinforcements flow in. Naval battles erupt. Casualties mount. Yamamoto commits forces to defend Guadalcanal, knowing it's overextending the fleet, but losing the initiative is worse. The combined fleet is still powerful, still capable of offensive action. But the arithmetic has shifted. American production is ramping up. New carriers are being launched. Trained pilots are entering the war, and Japan's losses, especially the irreplaceable pilots, cannot be made good. Yamamoto remains commander-in-chief. The government keeps him in place to maintain morale, but his influence wanes. The Naval General Staff no longer indulges his strategic gambles. The decisive battle doctrine, the classic strategy he tried to overturn, reasserts itself. By February 1943, Guadalcanal is lost. Japan begins the long, grinding retreat. Island by island, defeat after defeat. Yamamoto's face grows haggard. His staff worries. He chain smokes, plays shogi late into the night, writes letters he doesn't send. He has become what he always feared, the commander of a losing war. April 18, 1943, exactly 1 year. After the Doolittle raid, Admiral Yamamoto plans an inspection tour of forward bases in the Solomon Islands. He'll visit Balail, then Shortland, then Buin. The schedule is precise. Departure time, flight path, arrival times. The message detailing the itinerary is sent by radio, encrypted, but not secure enough. American codebreakers at Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor intercept it, decrypt it. Within hours, the information reaches Admiral Chester Nimitz, then Navy Secretary Frank Knox, then President Franklin Roosevelt. The decision is swift: kill Yamamoto. On April 18th, 18 P-38 Lightning fighters take off from Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. The mission is called Operation Vengeance. They fly 400 miles at wavetop height to avoid radar. Navigation is precise to the minute at 9:34 a.m., right on schedule. Two Japanese Betty bombers appear over Bougainville, escorted by 6 Zero fighters. Yamamoto is aboard the first bomber. The P-38s attack. The Zero escorts react, but the Americans ignore them, focusing on the bombers. Captain Thomas Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber close in. Yamamoto's bomber breaks toward the jungle, trying to reach the trees, treeing to land. One of the P-38's accounts conflict on Hoopen's fire. The bomber's right wing erupts in flame. The aircraft tumbles into the jungle canopy and crashes. The next day, Japanese search party finds the wreckage. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto is discovered thrown from the aircraft, still strapped upright in his seat. His white-gloved hand rests on the hilt of his sword. 2 bullet wounds in his jaw and shoulder. Dead on impact, dignified to the last. May 21, 1943. On Tokyo, a Japanese radio broadcast announces his death. The announcer's voice breaks. Toward the end, he seems to be crying. The nation enters mourning. Yamamoto is given a state funeral. His ashes are divided into 2. Earns one for his family, one for the nation. He is mourned as a hero. The architect of Pearl Harbor, the man who led Japan to glory. But those who knew him understand something else. He was the man who tried to prevent the war, who warned what would happen, who fought brilliantly when ordered, and who knew, with terrible precision, exactly how it would end. Epilogue: the war grinds on for 2 more years. The predictions Yamamoto made in 1940 prove prophetic. American industrial production overwhelms Japan. New carriers, new aircraft, endless supplies. The island-hopping campaign drives Japanese forces back toward the home islands. Firebombing raids incinerate Japanese cities. In August 1945, atomic bombs level Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On September 2nd, 1945, Japanese officials signed surrender documents aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The war Yamamoto tried to prevent has destroyed the nation he served, but his legacy is complicated. In America, he's remembered as the architect of Pearl Harbor, the man who struck the treacherous blow. In Japan, he's remembered as a tragic hero, loyal to the emperor but burdened with impossible duty. The truth is more nuanced. He was a man who studied his enemies so thoroughly he understood their strengths better than they did. A strategist whose tactical brilliance was matched by strategic despair. A patriot who saw a catastrophe coming and fought anyway. In his quarters aboard the Nagato, among his personal effects, they found Western books, Shakespeare, a leather-bound Bible, postcards from across America, photographs taken in Texas oil fields, in New York's Central Park, the artifacts of a man who knew both worlds, and who knew exactly which one would prevail. January 5th, 1942. Tokyo. The lanterns still swing. The crowds still celebrate, and aboard the Nagato, Admiral Yamamoto still sits alone with his maps, counting 6 months. Then the reckoning.